One of our regulars on the show, Dan Lohrmann from Presidio. And of course, Dan has a long history in Michigan. He was the CIO, CISO, probably other titles in there that I'm missing, uh, and still lives in Michigan. Now, him and Richard usually appear together, but summertime timing, it's hard to get that worked out. But one of the things, obviously, that's on everybody's mind right now, we wanted Dan to address is the CrowdStrike situation.
Yeah, Mike and Matt, it's great to be back with you again. It's thanks for having me. It was really a CrowdStrike Falcon update. It was a software update that went south. I mean, it was the update. It's almost not quite as bad as 9/11. Everyone knows where they were on that Friday because there were so many challenges. But there was a lot of rumors about it being a variety of other things. It was a hack. It was this. It was that. And I start the blog off that I think you're going to post, with this. People can go out and read the blog I wrote over the weekend around this. People telling me I was with my wife and my daughter at the airport. Oh, it was a hack. It was a hacker who did this, and all accounts suggest, and I certainly believe, and 99.9% of the world believes it was a CrowdStrike update. But we'll talk through some of the details here in a minute. But the way to resolve it, we proved that with my own company, Presidio, the company I work for. You could go in, back out, go in safe mode on your PC. If your PC was affected by this, you could back out that update, reboot your computer, and you would come up. But physically having to touch literally hundreds of thousands and millions of computers worldwide, this caused outages at banks. It caused airports, airlines, hospitals. I mean, people were impacted across the world. It's already being called the biggest IT outage in history, with numbers approaching $5.4 billion to recover from Australia to Atlanta. So it was a global problem that hit a very popular software package. And we'll talk through some of the details, but it really crippled and caused that we call the blue screen of death for Microsoft operating systems.
So you were at DTW when it happened, right? So how did it affect you personally?
Yeah, so it was funny. That afternoon, my wife was traveling down to visit our daughter down in South Carolina on American Airlines. So this was not Delta, but her flight was canceled, and we got down there, long wait, lines everywhere. We were in line for probably, by the way, we picked up the phone, right away, like most people probably did, and tried to call American Airlines. And they're like, we'll call you back in 8.5 to 12 hours. Woo. So it's like, you think about waiting, all those people out there who are concerned about long waits on the call center. This was unbelievable. I literally got the phone call back as I dropped them off at the airport. They were flying down to South Carolina, and I got the return call as I was driving back to Lansing. I live in East Lansing. So anyway, the bottom line is it was long. Got to the front. As we got to the front of the counter, the agent's like, yep, it was a hacker. She was confident. My wife's like, and I didn't say anything because it was a long line. There was only 3 agents. Everyone was waiting. She changed it to a different flight. Thankfully, they got there only 3 hours late. I knew people that were in the airport for days. We had friends with Delta Airlines that was supposed to fly Friday, couldn't get out till Tuesday of that week. So it was July 19th all the way to the following week. Because I think a lot of criticism around Delta. I'm a big Delta fan. I fly Delta all the time. I'm literally diamond with Delta, so I love Delta. But a lot of the experts were saying they canceled a lot of flights, and a lot of other airlines just delayed the flights. And then when Delta, really had to rebook all those people, so they had literally millions of people that had to be rebooked on new flights, and challenges galore there. But my daughter and my wife did get out. They got out about 3 hours delayed, and they ended up making down there late at night on Friday night down to Greenville, South Carolina.
It's just amazing to me that a software update would cause this much havoc. I don't understand, and I understand cybersecurity fairly well. Explain how that could happen.
Yeah, so great question. And so the big debate, one of the big uproars in the internet, and I talk about this and I link to a lot of articles in my blog, is it was really the update had access to the kernel of the Microsoft operating system, which is a pretty tough thing to get access to. And what I mean by that is, certain kinds of updates, we always talk about in the technical world without getting into too much details, what level of access do you have? Is it just a user level access? Is it root access? The system administrative access? This was actually accessing the kernel of Microsoft operating system. It was a bad update, had a lot of extra zeros in there. It choked the update system, and it actually choked the kernel of Microsoft. And when it did that, it to protect itself, the Microsoft operating system basically went into that blue screen that you see lots of pictures at airports and all around the country. People, they call it the blue screen of death, is what people are nicknaming it. But basically, the computer, you couldn't boot the computer. It was locked out. You were basically locked out. The only way you could fix it, you go in safe mode. If those who know PCs and servers and things, you go into safe mode, you back out the update, you literally delete the update, and then reboot the computer, and it would come back up. But the problem was you couldn't do that quickly remotely. You have to literally touch, I'm not going to say 100%, but 99% of these devices had to be physically changed and updated, which, this is a pretty popular company. It's a Fortune 500 company, CrowdStrike. And, it's known for the security they provide and the solutions that to prevent hackers from being able to do this very thing. And so there are all kinds of conspiracy theories out there. They say it was that, but it was really something else. I don't believe any of that. It was a software update, but it begs lots of other questions. It begs questions like, who's going to pay for all this? Is it going to all fall on CrowdStrike? Is it going to all, what about Microsoft? All the costs of, Delta and American Airlines and these hospitals. And I mean, God forbid, I haven't heard about anybody dying from this yet, but I mean, there were literally operations postponed. There were lots and lots of impacts at businesses and hospitals around the world. And so the impact was huge. There's people looking at the fine print on their license agreements, who's responsible, who's gonna, is it going to be covered by cyber insurance? Most experts say no, only like 10% of it probably going to be covered by cyber insurance. So this could be a huge financial hit to a lot of companies.
Yes, and I can see the personal injury lawyers already circling, smelling the money, right? We won't name any, but there's several popular ones in the Detroit area that are all over this already.
1-800-CALL Mike.
Yes, there you go. We'll leave it at that. We don't want to give free publicity, but go ahead, man. I cut you off.
No, that's okay. I was just wondering. I mean, getting access to the kernel of the internal Microsoft operating system, that's like the holy of holies, right? When it comes to IT. Is that one of the lessons that we can learn from this? Is that maybe that shouldn't happen that way when you're
great question. There's a ton of great lessons that I talk about in there that people are talking about. But I mean, it's interesting because there's a big debate, and there's even like some emails back and forth or some things that were published about Microsoft and the European Union fighting it out, saying it's the European Union's fault. So like, where is that coming from? Well, basically, there was several lawsuits, but there always seems to be lawsuits with the European Union and Microsoft saying that if they give that access to some organizations, they have to give it to like all these different organizations. So the fact that Microsoft could not lock that down, the fact that they were not able to do it, some people were saying they were forced to do it legally. But yes, I mean, being able to lock down in a more robust way, could that have solved the problem? Many people say yes. I think some of the other lessons are around, be prepared. We've been talking. It's funny, guys. I literally had, I don't know if you guys have read my book or not, but we talked about my book here on the show. it's several people emailed me and said, Dan, it's like the opening chapter in your book. Mayday, cyber Mayday. This was like a cyber Mayday. It wasn't caused by a cyber attack, but it was like airports were unavailable, phone calls couldn't be taken. I mean, this was like, it was not a 9/11. It was not a cyber 9/11 or a cyber Pearl Harbor, but I mean, it was pretty close to that kind of an event. It brought down a lot of people. And so being prepared, I mean, this is not, I think one of the messages we all need to take away is that, the big one does come. I mean, this is, be prepared. What's your backup strategy? What's your business continuity plan? If you can't access, I mean, we were seeing that with airlines where people were saying the system that literally would schedule pilots and cabin crew was one of the systems that was down and they couldn't use it. They're doing everything by, I guess, phone call and pen and paper. I mean, they couldn't access the system. So the planes could fly. It wasn't the planes couldn't fly, but you had air traffic control issues. You had all kinds of issues. But, being prepared for, tabletop exercises we've talked about on this show, full scale exercises, what if, asking the what if questions. Those are just some of the other lessons learned, but there's plenty of other ones.
One of the things Richard talks about all the time is there will be cyber war, and he wrote a book about it. This is kind of what would happen if the Chinese or the Russians really wanted to get nasty. This is probably something similar to this is what they would do if we got into that situation, right?
Correct. And people don't forget a few like basic facts. This was just Microsoft. It didn't hit Linux. It didn't hit some of the other operating systems. It didn't hit Apple. It didn't hit the iOS. So just imagine, could it be worse? Well, yeah. I mean, what if it was all their iPhones as well? What if it was all the different, Linux and Unix systems and all the other, this was a big chunk because a lot of people use Microsoft operating systems. A lot of, globally, obviously we saw the impact. But you're absolutely right, Mike. this is exactly the kind of a thing that a hacker would want to do, and or for a nation state in the event of a cyber war to cause havoc.